They say, show me a woman without shame, and I'll show you a man. Welcome to Shameless Parenting. Hear that breathing?
So this is definitely an authentic recording today. We've got the baby here and that's him breathing very heavily.
Yeah, that's not us breathing heavily after a big lunch. That's Rory, and he's unfortunately come down with his first cold from his sister.
Oh, not even 3 weeks old yet.
Poor
Crazy.
thing. Yeah. And so that's that heavy snuffling that you can hear. But welcome back. Obviously, we're coming off the back of our first adults only episode, and it's received some pretty interesting feedback through all the listeners. So thanks everyone that tuned in. We obviously go through relationship advice and some spicier questions, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can tell just from the background that you decided to put on.
Yeah. So again, if anyone's listening to this and they want to actually see the video, you can open that up in Spotify, or you can check out YouTube and some other things there. Maybe not for the adults only one, but one of the funniest bits of feedback that I did hear was in regards to the ANAL part of the conversation. And it was just this out of context direct message that I received on one of our accounts saying, Big Bunda deserves shelter.
What does that even mean?
So my understanding is bunda is like a slang, is like a kind of black UK slang for booty.
Oh, okay.
But if we have any, we've got any listeners out there who can inform us, that would be ideal. Did you know about that word, bunda?
No, I'd never heard of it before. And also this is not the appropriate type of things for us to be talking about on the non-adults only.
See, that's the problem. There's like spillover, isn't there?
Yeah.
But what I did do is, as I promised, because we had a question in the last episode about should you have access to your partner's phone?
Yeah.
Right? Full access to your partner's phone. And is it considered cheating to follow the social media accounts of other women that aren't your friend? Right? And so I kind of hit the streets really quickly. And when I say the streets, near us, it was opportunistic.
Nearby shopping centres. You've already been told off by the guards once.
Well, my little pest that won't go away. But and I've shown you the results now. So I spoke to a dozen women and a few men, and it was interesting results. What did you think?
Well, it was interesting. I think that most people said yes, it was appropriate to have access. A few people said no. Or a lot of people were kind of on the fence and said it depends, which I think is just
a cop-out.
Yeah, a total cop-out. Like, what do you mean it depends? It depends on what? Probably, I can understand if you say it depends how long you've been in a relationship for. That's fair enough. But, obviously the assumption is that you're in a long-term committed, kind of relationship.
See, I think this, and I tried to find some couples to ask them together, and some of them were actually, but maybe one party of the couple stood off camera. And that was always the most interesting dynamic for me, because you kind of look at them almost gauging, what's the right answer here. And actually, I think that most women, if they were to hand over their phones, not necessarily, dodgy stuff, but there would be things in there in the group chat and stuff like that you wouldn't want the male partner to see.
Well, you were having a bit of a look through my phone the other week, and you were like, oh, what's really annoying is that we send so many voice notes to each other. So you're like, well, I'm not going to listen to voice notes. And probably listening to voice note would probably feel a bit strange when it's not like a voice note that's meant for you. It's like listening to someone's voicemail or whatever. Would feel a bit weird. You're like, well, I can't even read this anyway. So that's the way to get around it, everybody. Send voice notes because they can't be bothered listening to them. No,
I think that actually is a bit of an invasion of privacy as well.
Yeah, agree.
Because of the intimacy, like you said. And I still remember, if you open someone else's mail that's not addressed to you, it's a federal crime. So I still kind of have that memory too growing up that actually that's probably a bygone era, but if you receive some mail, official mail, and it's to me and not to you, would you feel okay opening it?
No, I wouldn't open someone else's. I'd open your mail, no doubt. Especially if it's a package from Amazon, which seem to arrive all the time. But I wouldn't open up, any kind of mail that's addressed to someone that's not the two of us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's an interesting piece, and I think that there was a mix of attitudes there, and I think that what struck me from the younger generation is it's all about like consent, right? So anything goes as long as you have dialogue and consent, and I found that quite interesting.
It's really healthy, actually. I feel like this generation coming through, and you're talking about people that are probably like 18, 19, 20 kind of years old at the moment.
Yeah.
The fact that consistently you're seeing that actually the importance around consent and dialogue, and you've had a conversation and so forth about it, I think that's really positive. That's the kind of reactions that you're getting from that age group.
Yeah. Now this comment's going to sound a bit creepy coming off the back of that, but I do say that there's a general correlation between how stylishly, or dare I say provocatively, the woman is dressing and how actually she leans to the side of jealousy.
Oh, did you notice when you were out on the streets?
I kind of noticed a bit of that. That
The
actually
streets.
the streets, yeah, the mean streets. But if the woman is dressing a little bit more provocatively, or what you would say sexier, let's just call it a spade, they would tend to be more on the jealous side. Isn't that interesting?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, because you told it's like an empowerment thing, right? But actually, I don't know. All right, let's kick off. So this week's episode is back on track, out of the gutter, and into newborn life. So this is really about, we've covered birth, and now this is in the first couple of weeks and dealing with a newborn in general. And we'll kick it off with a shameless story. And this is a really interesting one. This is one that's been submitted from a dad, a new dad, but it's also anonymous. So let me read it on the phone here. Okay, so dear podcast. Okay, so here's a confession that I've been keeping to myself. Every day when I get home from work, before I even set foot in the door, I pull up my phone and check the baby monitor app. I need to know if the newborn is asleep. If he's awake, I linger outside or maybe go around the corner for a bit longer until my wife puts him down. See, the truth is that soothing our baby feels like a battle I can't win. He cries no matter what I do. I can't seem to calm him down like my wife can. It stresses me out. I feel useless. And it's gone to the point where the sound of his crying just sends my anxiety through the roof. But here's the part that's really messing with me. My wife holds it against me. She mentioned a few times how it seems like I'm always coming home just a little bit late, and then I can tell that she feels resentful that I can't settle him and give her a break.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So many thoughts that come up around this one.
It's well, you would just hit me with your reactions first, and I'll kind of obviously represent my own experience and also things that I have heard along the way from other fathers.
Yeah. Look, I think that it is definitely a common thing where babies settle better with mothers because of, especially if you're breastfeeding, if you don't have a dummy involved, etc. To be honest, when they're newborn, pretty much they just want to eat and sleep, and there's not a whole lot you can do to, well, you definitely can't resettle a baby if they're hungry. There's nothing you can do about that. If they're breastfed or obviously you can organize a bottle or whatever then. I think that though there are quite a few times where I may have noticed that it's very easy to get into this cycle where, because you can settle them faster and better, you just do it. You're like, well, they could spend 10 minutes with you or 2 minutes with me. I can pop them on the boob and then he's kind of settled. And I think that's a real trap that you can get into, and it almost then becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where, well, as a result, dad can't settle the baby because he's never even been given the chance to, and the baby hasn't even been given that opportunity to kind of then bond, even if it's going to take a little bit longer. So I think that particularly as the mother and the woman, you have to make a real conscious effort to set your partner up for success in that way. And that is through leaving the baby with them as long as they are properly fed. Beyond that, there absolutely is lots that the father can be doing. He just needs to be given the chance and the support and the time to be able to do that, because it may take a little bit longer. And then it's also looking at what other aids do you have as well. So a dummy is something that's very controversial. Some people love dummies. Some people absolutely hate dummies. If it's something that you are open to, that is going to help your partner be able to settle a baby, because sometimes they just, want to be able to suck on something. So it's kind of like, yeah, it is about looking at setting them up for success, giving the opportunity, stepping away from the situation, especially once the baby is a little bit older as well. And then looking at what other tools like dummies, etc., white noise, so forth, that, you know, you could kind of incorporate in that could help him as well. Now they can see us.
Now you can see.
And you can see a very, hopefully, cute looking baby.
You can see us and Rory. So we'll keep this in and the video will play from here.
Cool.
Apologies, everyone. Look, I was a bit of a roller coaster, this question, because when he comes out of the gate with the fact that he's waiting to come back in to support and to help, and even more so checking the monitor and making sure the kid's down, that's a pretty hard thing to come back from. I think that's a dangerous road to go down, and it's not something that you want to play with, right? Because
100%.
So that's quite hard. Is bordering on irredeemable in some ways, I think, and you need to kind of stop that. But I do have a lot of sympathy for why he's doing it, and I must say that in the newborn phase, when you're trying to be an involved father, and so much of soothing is about breastfeeding, it's very, very easy. And if your kid is on the more challenging side, it's very, very easy to have these feelings of inadequacy and also just frustration of just the panic of knowing that you're being set up to fail every time. And most of the time that your wife or partner only gets the job done by whipping the titties out anyway, in a lot of the cases, in most of the cases. So I've got a lot of sympathy for men who go through this. And, you know, I've gone through it to an extent that sometimes you just have to go in and help even though you know it's going to fail, because your partner needs two things. They need that ability to know that you will try, and hopefully, you know, on the small chance of success that you have, this mission impossible, that if you do pull it off, that you can actually have a break for your partner. But I get it. It's very stressful. You feel like you're on a suicide mission, you know, like sometimes, and I'm being dramatic, but at the same time, you know, this is something that happens multiple times a day, and this is what you're kind of greeted with, especially coming home from work where you've had respite from that. So it's a combination of factors, and I think that the part where he talks about resentment building, like I think that a lot of fathers that I talk to have that same, they express that to me. You know, they express the fact that, you know, my wife, she feels resentful that I can't soothe the baby, right? And that she has to do all the work, she doesn't get a break. But the deck is very much stacked against men in that way, you know, and a lot of the times out of frustration, I think women will just kind of blame the man as being lazy or whatever it is. But I think that you got to take a step back and look at what's being asked of them as well. And it is really, really tough. And you have to be honest with yourself that how many times that when you finally soothe the baby, you're using breastfeeding or some kind of feeding technique.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will have sympathy, but absolutely, this kind of behavior of waiting before you come in to help, that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people.
I can see from her side, though, how that resentment can build. And something actually that I was thinking about yesterday with you is that I've been so thankful for since we've, you know, come back with Rory, is that every time I've asked you to do something, your response has always been yes. So I'll say, and sometimes it's like I could do it, but I just don't feel like it. Like it's like a nappy. I feel like I've changed 100 nappies today. And I'll just say, Ryan, can you just change this nappy? And your default answer, to your credit, is always yes. And I know that I shouldn't feel relief around that, but actually it makes a huge difference to me to know that every time I ask you to do something, you always say yes. It's never, oh, but I want to quickly do this thing first or this, that, because you know that when you have a baby or whatever, you don't have that option of like, oh, I just got to quickly run to the toilet or blow my nose or whatever, you know, first. And that I think really helps alleviate if you can't do things like the settling and this and that, knowing that your partner always has that default response of anytime you ask for something, they just say yes, I think makes a huge difference. It has for me, for sure.
Yeah, I know. And I think that newborn life is comprised of, you know, it's a lot like war in a way, right? Like is characterized by large portions of boring, undemanding work and then short, sharp periods of intense panic.
So
And when
true.
something needs to be done, it needs to be done now, because the baby is crying
Yeah.
and it's so stressful. So, yeah, I think that it's a very jolting experience for everyone involved. And I'm going to labor on this fact a little bit because I think within this dad's question, a lot of people will find some common ground and common experience. And I think that what he's talking about are the seedlings for poisoning the well for a lot of marriages and a lot of partnerships.
Yeah.
The jump from being a functional couple without kids to a functional, parenting relationship, this is the beginning and the foundations of that, and it's really stepping off on the wrong foot. And I talk to a lot of couples and parents and dads who always talk back to this time when they're stressed, they're trying to do it, they're failing, and the wife has just snapped at them. And I get it. I understand the situation and totally understand the context, but I think you really need to have a talk about this before it happens, ideally, and maybe in the morning where things are calm and when you're one of those periods of peace that I talked about in that wartime analogy. But talk about it, because the damage that's occurred there will affect you later in your relationship. And I think that is the biggest thing that, because I think women are under so much stress and sleep deprivation in this period that whatever was said in anger, it's like what you say when you're hungry. It's just like, whatever. I actually don't feel that responsible for some of those things because I had to get by. I had to, and it was unrelenting with this baby demanding everything for me. But I think men carry that with them a little bit more because you're supposed to be a partnership, and then all of a sudden things get tense.
Well, I think it's twofold. I think that, look, the worst part of you will come out at 3 a.m. when you're sleep deprived and you've got a screaming baby and, your partner's not able to settle them, blah, blah, blah. Like, the worst part of you will come out. And so I think it's twofold. I think you're right. Yes, you need to practice trying to rein it in, not snap at your partner, et cetera, and but when you do, your partner also just needs to let that wash over them and just know that this person is not at their best right now, and let's try and reset in the morning. And I think if you both try and do that together, you can get through it, because you're right that this is where things will kind of make or break, and bad foundations can be set.
Yeah. All right. So if you're listening, and I'm sure you are because you submitted the question, don't give up hope. Maybe stop checking the monitor and just move on from that and stop that. But have a talk to your wife about it.
Yeah.
Right? And have a talk at the right time when things are calm. It's not the middle of the night. And just come up with ways that you can show her that you're willing to try, but you are feeling intense anxiety around the failure and being set up to fail. Right? And maybe it's getting a bottle. Like a lot of the times I think that the transition from dummy to bottle gives the man 2 tools to actually soothe the baby, and it can be life-changing. But if you don't have the dummy, you don't have the bottle, and all you have is the breast in the early days, it is really, really hard. It's hard for the mum.
Yeah.
And she's got 2 tools right there. Or maybe 1, depending on how the nipples are.
Yeah.
All right. That was a good question.
That was a great question.
All right. Well, let's move on to our best and worst. And the frame for this is the best and the worst in dealing with the newborn phase, especially in the first few weeks of life.
Yep.
So let's hit it.
Okay, so my best is something that I have used this time that I didn't use with Rose, and I wish that I had, which is the SRC recovery tights. So I also used the pregnancy ones, which I found okay, but I didn't find them life-changing. The recovery tights have been amazing. So you can get them in a shorts version, you can get them in a long version. The reason that I got them this time was because I've had a lot more challenges, I guess, with this pregnancy than I did the first time around varicose veins. And also I got a hernia a few months ago, which was great.
I told you to stop deadlifting.
Yeah, it's just a warning to everyone who's pregnant, especially when you've got toddler and other little kids. Try not to overdo it. I know that it's really hard. I obviously did overdo it. So that's a whole thing that we have to deal with. but that's what kind of prompted me. But I think even if he didn't have those health issues, I would say that the support that I feel like I'm getting for those recovery tights is amazing, particularly around my abs. You know, I was saying to you that at the moment, like when I cough, especially if I cough really hard, like my abs feel quite sore, right? Because everything's kind of still recovering, and I'm probably using my abs more than you're not supposed to be using them at all. But once again, it's stuff that's like pretty much impossible when you're looking after, you know, 2 little kids. So the days that I wear them, my body feels so much better. On the days that I don't wear them, I can feel it at the end of the day. So they are expensive if you buy them new, but you can sell them on. There's loads of them on Facebook Marketplace to get them secondhand as well. So highly recommend SRC recovery tights.
Well, that's a good one. And there aren't that many options in terms of the proper tights, right? These aren't just normal tights. They're specially made to compact and everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's like been a whole bunch of experts that have been involved in the design of these things as well. And my obstetrician actually recommended them as well.
And you actually can get a rebate for them as well from most of your health funds.
Yes.
So that's worth calling out.
It's a good reminder that I need to get onto that.
I hate it when it's not high caps. All right, my best. It's going to sound a bit strange coming from that listener question, but I swear this part wasn't planned. And it is actually remote baby monitors.
Okay. Do you have anything you need to admit to me?
No, because you have access. I mean, you'll be able to tell where I was because we not only have full access to phones, but we have GPS tracking. Mm-hmm. So that is a whole another level of surveillance that we've got going on. Now, the reason I talk about this, and especially if you have more than one kid, being able to set up multiple cameras to understand when to go in to kind of resettle your child when they're sleeping or whatever it is a lifesaver. And there are many times where Rory's been down, we've set up the camera, you can access it on your phone anywhere in the house, and it gives you that freedom where you're not worried and constantly checking on them because you can tell, right? And I think it's a really useful tool in sleep training, but especially at the start where you need to be doing multiple things when the kids are down. You've got a long list of things to do and you can't waste time sitting by your kids, right? Some people say or claim that it makes them more anxious and you'd be better off not having that.
Not looking.
But it's like anything. It's like a phone. You can tune the notifications or the alerts to cater for whatever level of nervousness you have around your child. So I think it's a kind of crucial thing. And they're so cheap now. You can set up multiple ones. They're all internet connected. That's going to be my best.
I feel like you need to do like a specific session just on that though, just on the tech, because there's so many different, I guess, brands and stuff out there and lots of different options that we've looked at. And also a lot of people get nervous around the security. You know, there's obviously been a little bit around people hacking them and talking to people's babies and all that kind of stuff. So that would be an interesting deep dive because I know you have done a lot of research into all of that as well. Yeah,
that's right. There's some sick people out there yelling at babies through 2G connections. But we'll cover that in a separate issue. So what's your worst?
Okay, so what I'm actually going to go with is something that we don't have at the moment, but we had for Rose, which was one of those very pretty looking Moses basket bassinet type things. There are loads of them around. There are some fantastic looking Moses baskets or bassinets that you can buy. And I think that before you have, especially your first baby, you think, oh, I'm just going to have this lovely, pretty little straw basket, just, floating at different places around the house.
Byron Bay baby.
Exactly. I'm going to take it to the park and he's just going to like sleep then. And then very quickly you realize that babies actually don't love sleeping when they're not being held, especially during the day. And the amount of time that your baby is going to be A, small enough and B, content enough to sleep in this tiny little basket is very slim. So I would say don't bother with them. We have the Baby Bjorn bouncer, which I think works really, really well. Pop them in there. They can sleep a little bit in there, but there are obviously some recommendations around how long you allow them to be in those things and kind of sleep in those things. You definitely need somewhere where you can put your baby down around the house. But I think that in my experience, babies want to be held, which is where wraps and carriers and stuff are really helpful, or they don't want to be flat on their back all the time. I find especially during the day, they seem to know quite early on the difference between day and night. So anything with a little bit of an incline, or you can put a little bit of a bounce to it, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a good one. Look, my worst is going to be a bit of a nothing one, but my worst is childcare. And why I say that is because we started off the episode by saying Rory's sick, And the reality is when you bring a newborn home, that if you have children that are in childcare, they will bring back viruses almost constantly and infect your newborn, right? And it can be quite scary because there's nothing much a newborn can do to work out, congestion and phlegm and things like that. I just think the whole thing's a scam, like having to pay for days that you're not there and all this kind of thing. So not going to get into it too much, but that's my worst for this week. I know it's not practical, but I had to get off my chest.
Again, could be a whole deep dive episode into into childcare as well. Absolutely. And actually coming back to the basket idea, that's why having those kinds of bassinets and stuff that you can incline are really good, especially when they're a bit mucousy and so forth as well, just to help them so they're not flat on their back, but they can actually help with kind of draining things down and stuff as well is really useful. But yeah, poor Rory, he's been very sniffly, but I must admit that he's not been too bad. He's still feeding really well. There's lots that you can do to help kind of clear them out, which is good.
Great. All right, well, I think we'll cut it there for this week, and we'll rejoin the party next week.
Awesome. Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Bye.